everybody, this is Gaynor Milky with Moving the Needle, and I am joined by John Higgins, my co-host, and today we have a special guest, Chris Farrell. So, John, do you want to give your intro and then we'll pass it over to Chris?
Sure. Thanks, Gaynor, and thanks, Chris, for joining us. Some of you may not be aware, but Gaynor and I have started doing these recordings to just help move the needle on your digital transformation as a CPA practitioner. And so we like to bring on various guests that can help you do just that. And so today we have Chris Farrell, the co-founder or founder of Liscio. Welcome, Chris, and thank you for taking time to join us today.
Great to be here, John. Thank you, Gaynor. I'm excited about the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think Chris has got a fabulous view of the tax landscape and also the accounting profession in general. So we'll dive right in and ask you, Chris, what are you seeing as you're talking to firms and as Liscio is really moving the needle on tax automation, like no other firm really?
Sure. Well, I think it's really this idea that client experience is the biggest single differentiator for firms. So I'm a CPA myself, started with Arthur Andersen a million years ago, was a client of CPA firms along the way as a public company CFO, also as an individual. And I think there was this insight that clients are really, the better client you are of a CPA firm, typically the worse the experience is because you end up with so many different tools and so forth. It gets really, really messy. So the idea then is, if client experience isn't great, where we're meeting them, which is in the digital space more and more today, then things really start to get tougher in the relationship. So we're really focused there.
Okay.
Chris, since you've started your career at Andersen, obviously you've been in the profession for a while. So how are you seeing that kind of transition, from like baby boomers like myself to now the younger generation, in terms of the acceptance of a digital model, doing things, online?
Yeah, everybody's online now. And I think that's the big change, right? So at Andersen, I started in 1993. We did everything in person. So literally drive out to the client would come to us, right? And everything was across the desk. So as we started to see things fragment over the years, move to email, DocuSign, so forth, we saw engagement at pretty much every age group level to a certain degree. And I think that's borne out also just by what we see in the consumer world. Like, baby boomers, for example, are 70% using online banking. So the digital space is one that firms need to participate in and own for every generation of client, not just for the millennials. It is literally for everybody. And I'm not a spring chicken, right? But I don't go to the bank anymore either, right? And so I think it's having this notion that there is a hybrid service approach. You have to have a great digital arm. You have to have a great in-person arm, unless you're a purely digital firm. And that's what a great client experience is about, being where you need to be when your client needs you there. So sometimes in your pocket, sometimes in your office.
Yeah. And I think that's so true what you said about, it's really every firm and every client that needs to get comfortable with digital transformation, even though that term sounds like kind of new agey to some people. It's really what's happened over the past 10 years. I mean, we're not going to the bank. People are buying things on Facebook and TikTok and Amazon and that's like everybody. It's not just the younger folks. So, if you've got a firm that's mature, how do you even get started in the process on the tax side of automating?
I think you need to start taking a look at what you really have. And there's this idea that really needs to be taken off the table, which is it's an all or nothing prospect. Digital transformation means there's a shift that's happening over a long time scale that we need to be participating in. And so if we don't start making that shift, I think banks started moving us to online banking in 2008. And guess what? They've gotten a very high adoption. They're probably 80% of banking is now done online, not 100%, right? And this is over a decade and a half, almost 2 decades, right? So what we need to start thinking about as practitioners is, when are we going to start making the move? And I think a lot of firms, I'd say 90% of firms haven't really started making the move in earnest for tax. Most firms are still sending out the paper organizer that is from the Reagan era, right? It hasn't changed. And most firms are thinking, hey, look, I do have some DocuSign here. I do have some things, right? And so I think it's been a tentative move forward for many that will pick up pace as things go along. But the crux of getting the digital component to work inside of firms is the client experience, because if they don't play along, nothing works. So let's take a look at, like, for example, the paper experience for tax gathering. People send out tax organizers. How many come back? Most firms will report fewer than half. So we know that isn't working, right? And so what are we going to do for that half? Can we get people onto digital? Sure, we could probably get 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% on. Maybe not all in year one, but certainly over time, we know that's where it's going. So how do you lead client experience in the right way, not in an all or nothing approach, but with a longer term vision about what it is you want to build as an organization and how you want your clients to engage with your firm and the brand?
Mm. So I have a question for you, Chris, because this is something that kind of comes to mind when we talk about the client experience and how it's being digitized and across ages. So you think about going to your doctor's office, they don't hand you a bunch of paper anymore. Most offices are giving you an iPad or some device that you've got to navigate, to be served, basically. So, why do you think accounting firms have been so much slower to move when even, the smallest, I think of, I go to a particular doctor, it's a small office, they're all digitized. So why do you think that accounting firms are lagging in that way?
I think it has a lot to do with size, right? So if you're a big hospital group, you can go in there with a big tech team and you can, really push a big rock uphill. If
Mm-hmm.
you're in a smaller firm, it's much harder. You have to make the decision on the technology yourself. You have to implement the technology yourself. You have to get the clients to adopt. There's a lot of work that is entailed, right? And so I think when we look at the twin combinations of comfort, one, like, I've been doing this for years, I'm comfortable with it. And two, I don't necessarily know, given my state today, that I want to go take on another thing. I think that creates kind of this twin, headwind that a lot of
Yeah.
firms can't push against. The counter to that is, if you push against it a little bit, for example, if you're willing to invest, let's say with Liscio, an hour or two of your time, we'll save you a couple hundred hours. The question, though, I think a lot of firms, haven't realized yet is, why would it be different than any other software I've ever implemented? Because when I implemented, you pick whatever it was, practice management, tax, et cetera. The investment profile was absolutely positively staggering. Everybody's lived through it. They fought those wars. Maybe don't want to go pick another battle like that, right? So I think there has to be this understanding that, it is easier, right? It's easier now than ever to fix the
Mm-hmm.
client experience, and it's not as a big of a lift. But until people really understand that, it's still going to be really slow going, I think.
Yeah.
Chris, I think it would be helpful to maybe give us a little bit of insight into Liscio, kind of what it is and how it works in a CPA practice.
Sure. Yeah, that's helpful, John. Really, in a nutshell, we're a client experience platform that sits between the client and the firm. So the firm can continue to use all of the systems they're using today, still the same tax software, still the same practice management, still the same bookkeeping software, and so forth. The difference is, instead of sending things piecemeal through email, text messaging, a portal for tax, maybe a portal for advisory, et cetera, DocuSign for signatures, and instead of having a multitude of solutions to manage a client, you actually bring it down into one single conduit. So you can get your tax organizers through it. You can get your tax returns delivered and signed through it. You can communicate securely. Your client has a place to go, one place to go find all of their files. So it becomes like an app-like experience, just like a bank, just like a financial institution, but with the accounting firm. And so what happens when that starts to take hold is, the accountant knows that they can see everything in one place, and the client knows they can do everything in one place. And that
Mm-hmm.
starts to bring the chaos level down on both sides, just like banks did.
Mm-hmm.
And once that happens, you end up with a ton of efficiency and a lot happier of a client. So Liscio, we sit right in the middle. We don't require you to change what you're doing today, and you give your client a much better experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Well,
think that's, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gaynor.
oh, I was just going to say, full disclosure, my accountant, actually my former accountant and my present accountant both use Liscio. And so that made it really easy when I made a transition. Everything was already in Liscio, so I could just access it. And, it does change the way I think about like doing my taxes, because I'm just like, oh, good, I'm just gonna upload everything into Liscio and they can like go grab it and send me messages back and forth. And I they don't get lost in email and all those things, so I can speak to it myself.
Yeah, and it really seems to fit a big need, because I think we could all agree that most firms have have the whole tax prep software piece taken care of, right? Because they're so far into it now. But it's all that peripheral work around it, getting the data in and getting the output product back to the client. Those would seem like great opportunities for virtually any firm to go further down that digital transformation path.
Absolutely. It's a missing piece because, as we know, if you have everything on time from your clients, you're not chasing them, everything's coming in a structured format, the software is doing a lot of the chasing and the organization for you. It's placing the signatures for you on the documents. It's walking clients through the tax returns automatically. It's reminding the clients to pay their estimated taxes. It's taking them to the IRS and state sites for payment. How much administrative work is that taking off of the accountant's plate? It's also giving the client some place to go to find the returns from prior years, so they're not calling into the firm. So the temperature goes way down, profits go way up, and the client's happier because they can self-service instead of having to call in and wait, right?
Yeah.
So it's such a big win. And I think that's the part. I think when people think about productivity, they think, well, what can I do in my back office to get more productive? We've already done almost everything you can do. The question then is, what would happen if your clients were playing ball and giving you everything you need, and you had a 360-degree view of everything happening with your clients?
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I mean, I always like to go back to the example, just FedEx. You know, I can go and see exactly where my package is. Probably more information than I need to know exactly where the truck is and so on. But you know, how far does like Liscio get into allowing me, if I'm a client, to kind of know where things stand with my engagement?
Yeah, I think, that's more about the firm. We don't want to expose that part yet because
Okay.
maybe you know how things go. You don't want to be informing the client they might be a couple of weeks out last night,
Right,
have
yeah.
everything. So we haven't gone to that pizza tracking level yet, but I think that's definitely a consideration for the future. If we see something in practice management progressing, do we inform the client? But I think your FedEx example, John, is really a great one, because if you know, right, where things are, and in this case, the firm can see exactly where the client is, then you know whether or not you need to make a call. And
Yeah.
so everything we're doing, we can tell whether or not the client has opened up the tax return, whether or not they've signed it, et cetera. So it's pretty powerful from a transparency perspective.
And if I'm the client, do I know, for example, that the tax practitioner is waiting for me for some information?
Oh yeah.
So you have that part.
We're reminding, we have a progress bar for them, all that kind of thing. So they have one task pane where they can see everything they owe the firm, and they'll get one digest email a week for things that are outstanding and with the due dates. So
As far as what Liscio's been up to for this tax season, I know that you released quite a few like advancements in Liscio, and then you have more in the future. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
sure. Really, tax automation is where we're addressing the client side of what is slowing the process down. So we have what we call a smart organizer, which is personalized. So instead of that thick organizer that gets sent out, we can just read everything off of that PDF that would normally go to the printer or be sent. And just to remind everybody, the tax organizer was always meant for the accountant, never for a client. It's a professional document. It's worded for us. It's very dense. And we used to use it when sitting across the desk, right? At some point, people said that people aren't coming in. I need to send it to them. They started mailing and that, of course, you're not going to get those back because they read like accountant text. So we actually will read that and create personalized checklists. Gainer, these are all the items you gave us last year. You had a W-2 from Schwab, you had 1099 from Fidelity, and all these different things, right? So we personalize the list. We make it so you can answer the yes/no questions right from a phone. If there's additional questions that need follow-up, like did you get married, you'll ask for the spouse name, date of matrimony, and so forth. So all that follow-up is done, and the client can do it from a phone, a tablet, or a PC. So super easy. We do the reminders, we get the files back, we organize the files, convert everything to PDF as necessary, et cetera. That saves a firm about an hour or two per return. Then they'll run it through their tax prep process, review it, and when they deliver, our smart tax delivery product will take care of the walkthrough. First page is going to show what you owe or what you're getting back. The question's off the table. We'll walk them through each of the federal and state returns, and they'll verify all the information is correct. Only after that's done, we know the client is good, their address is good, the amounts are good, everything's good. Then we present them with the signature. We automatically place the signature blocks right in the document on state and federal returns. And then we'll walk them through any payments, estimated payments due with a schedule, let them know we're going to remind them automatically, walk them through the federal and state payments due as necessary, and they're done. And so when you compare that to the world accountants have been living in to date, which is, well, I'm electronic, I'm docu-signing these. What's the problem with DocuSign? It's a signature solution, not a personalized walkthrough. So most people go in, open a DocuSign, and guess what? They hit sign. It jumps them all the way to the signature line. They sign, they send. And they call the accountant saying, am I getting any money back? Right? Because nobody's going to sit there and scroll through a whole return. Right? And DocuSign is a signature solution. It's not a tax delivery solution. So we're literally working on those aspects of the client experience. They know exactly where they stand. They're getting the reminders. They're getting the care at that very, very important touch point. And that's going to save another 15 minutes per return.
And Chris, where are the documents stored? Like, do you guys have a storage solution, or I saw on your website that you have integration to Google Drive and I think OneDrive,
Smart Vault, SharePoint, Box. So there's two kinds of file storage we kind of think of. And so one way to think of it, John, is there's always a difference between what a client wants in terms of storage, what the firm wants, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So clients want really easy retrieval. Like you go to your Bank of America app, it's easy to get your statements. But on Bank of America's side, they want highly, highly structured formats. So when we think about client document management, Liscio, we handle all of that. So Gainer, for example, can go in our Liscio app and see your prior year returns, regardless of accountant, and they're already there. And if the accountant has a record keeping bit where they want, for example, for liability perspective, to delete things, they can delete them on their side, but Gainer gets to keep her documents, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And so client DMS and firm DMS is a important concept because everybody have always had this idea that client and firm are going to share the same document management structure. Doesn't really work out well. So use Liscio as a client DMS. We handle that. It's all baked in the portal. And then use whatever storage solution you want as firm DMS, and you have a great setup.
Okay, that's good. Good. And how about the interaction with the practice management system? Kind of where does Liscio start and stop relative to just practice management systems more broadly?
Yeah, we have some basic integrations and that kind of thing. But I think most importantly, practice management is largely separate, and most practice management systems don't have a way of interacting. So if you think about practice management and email today, usually they're entirely separated. So practice management and texting entirely separated and so forth. So keep on using the practice management system the way you are. But when it comes time to send something as you would via, let's say, email or so forth, just put it in Liscio. We have an email integration. We have secure messaging. We have tasks and requests to keep clients on deadline. We have signatures, all that. So instead of going to DocuSign, you'd go to Liscio. Instead of going to encrypted email, you'd go to Liscio, et cetera. It'll all be there. So think of that kind of divide. And that's the setup, which is why it's so easy to implement.
Yeah, and it goes back to your original point that it's the bridge between the client and the CPA. Yep, great.
Yep, yeah. That we don't want to disrupt the back office. The back office flows are good. Everybody has those nailed down. Been working for years. So all we're doing is really just saying you've got a great process. You just need some cleanup, typically in between how you and your clients operate. You get that 360-degree view, and you get a lot of personalization for your client.
So how long does it take to get up and running with Liscio? If somebody's kind of on the fence about doing something for a tax season, how far in advance would you recommend that they bite the bullet and actually implement?
It would take them less than an hour or two.
Okay.
So we do most of the work. We have an all US based team. And so we'll just pull the information out of the practice management system or the tax software. That gives us all the client and basically contact and client information. We'll pull it in, set it all up, and then we'll train you and you get unlimited support, not only for you, but also for your clients. So we'll say, hey, here's some announcements. We'll give you the announcements, and then you're off and running. And then to use it, you can print out of, let's say, your tax software, your PDFs, drag and drop them into us, and we will automatically create those, let's say, tax delivery walkthroughs. It's just literally drag, drop, review, send, and you're all set. We do all the matching, all that stuff. So dead simple. Think of it like just a more complicated. I don't want to say it's as easy as, but since we've done all the setup, it's like a DocuSign right? Where you have it up and running, you drag the document you want to send in, we basically will automate it and you kick it out to the client.
Excellent. So definitely something to consider to help corral all of those client documents and also improve the client experience from end to end and hopefully expedite the tax preparation process.
Yeah, it's an immediate time saver. It's kind of a no-brainer, and you can just use it for the clients you have email addresses for, right?
Mhm.
So if you have a bunch of paper clients, don't worry about it. If you got clients you know are good, I think it's a great solution. A lot easier than using. It's a lot more successful than using something like a DocuSign for the reasons we talked about.
Yeah, I know. As I said, I use it with my accountants. I love it. It makes it seamless and really easy. And you know, they just put everything in there. And there's the app, which you can scan documents on the app, which is handy too. So, for all of those clients who live on their phones, which is everybody now, it's
Yeah.
it's right there. There's no excuse not to get those documents into your accountant for sure.
Well, that's a good testimonial, Gainer, because I think of I use a small practitioner to do my taxes, and it's all email. It's email back and forth. So I like the idea of this. I'll have to recommend it to him, or
Well,
introduce him to it. So
the
to that point, Chris,
security.
if somebody wants to learn more about it, do you have like recorded demos on your website, or do you have webinars? So what's the best?
You'll actually see me on the website. I think I've got a couple of walkthroughs on there, and John, going back to your accountant doing everything on email, you can go remind him of publication 4557 saying, you can't really put any of my stuff on email. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, we didn't really touch on the security aspect of this, but I mean, it's a lock and load, your security requirements are done, right? You put Liscio in place and we don't have to worry about, the IRS regulations anymore.
Yeah, the Federal Trade Commission came down on this,
Yeah.
and there's a Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, and then the IRS put out publication 4557, all of which stipulate pretty heavy fines for not being a great custodian of personally identifiable information, because there's so many breaches, as you all know.
Yeah.
And there's nothing scarier to firms and professionals than having a client data issue. And it really all happens, the super majority of everything happens through email. So the IRS is constantly putting out their dirty dozen. Every year it's phishing and saying, don't do this.
Right.
But clients have to get off the ball, not clients, firms need to get off the ball and take care of their clients by committing to not sending anything over email that has a social, income, financials, anything like that. That's just bad practice, right?
Yeah.
Go
Good.
ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that's really important too, that I know I do it myself. Fewer and fewer clients are going to be willing to send that kind of information through email because there's been so much reporting on phishing and everything else. When somebody asks me to send that, I'm like, no, where can I upload it to securely? Right. So I think it's going to be the way of the future, and it only takes one breach to have reputational damage. So,
I think 2/3 of small firms that have a breach don't survive.
yeah.
Big number.
It's a huge number. It's the reputational harm is so big that, and the number of firms getting breached is not insignificant, which is why I think cybersecurity is now the number one insurance cost in the stack.
Uh-huh.
And some cyber insurance companies will give you 10% off if you use Liscio, just because the difference is so large.
Well,
But yeah,
nice
but also I think that people are realizing that if you have to have a WISP. If you don't have a WISP, and you're not following or you're not following your WISP, and you have an incident, the cyber insurance policies are no longer covering the damage, which is why they tend to be potentially, terminal for firms.
So we'd be remiss not to ask about it in the day we live in today. What do you see the impact of AI being on your solution?
I think it's gonna be awesome for just about everybody in the profession. It'll take time. I think there has to be some trust built around it and so forth. But as that happens, we're going to see a lot more personalization. So we talked about healthcare before, and we know we all want tailored medicine, right? When we get sick, I don't want a random dose, or this everybody else's dose. I want something that's made for me, tailored for me, et cetera, right? That's really the dream. And I think we're getting very close to that. AI is going to allow us to surface those kinds of insights nonstop for the benefit of the client and the firm. So you can imagine how much better a relationship will be when, instead of the firm having to remember every detail about every client before they go in a meeting, here's what you need to know.
Yeah.
Or if there's a major tax law change and so forth, here's how it's going to impact your clients. And here's the list of clients whom it's going to impact. You want me to help you draft some notifications to them, right? All of these things are going to be enabled by unlocking the power of the data. And I think the grand plan and the grand hope for the profession as a whole is that the data is going to be used for good every time, right? And I think as that happens, we're going to be able to spend so much time building relationships, really understanding our clients and helping them be proactive about the future, instead of having to do, a lot of what we might call butter passing jobs, right? Like placing, signature blocks on forms and digging through old emails to remember details. All that stuff's going to get abstracted and the good stuff will be left. So I've never been as bullish on the accounting profession as I am now. It's just looking brighter and brighter, more and more profitable, and more desirable as a place to be, as a profession.
Yeah, I think that's, I totally agree with that. I'm really excited to see how this, AI technology starts to really find its way into the various applications that we as CPAs use day in and day out. And it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
Lots
for
of upside.
helping to lead the way, Chris. It's
Yeah.
Likewise. Your sharing and your perspective on all this have always been so keen. So, lots to look forward to.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Chris. And for this episode of Moving the Needle, we'll say goodbye for now.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gaynor. Thank you, John. Thanks, everybody.
You are welcome.